in my company's defense, there was an awful. So each resort will have a, this is our VP of this resort kind of thing. And I feel like at our specific resort, there was a decent amount of turnover in that position. And then in the senior director of village operations below that, there was a decent amount of turnover as well. And I think that because of that, it's one of the reasons my director stayed in his position for so long, because someone new would come in and say, stop doing that, and he would stop for a little bit. And then, that person above him would leave or get promoted out, and a new person would come in and they would go, what are you doing? Stop doing that. And, it kept allowing it to happen,
Yeah. Just, hey, stop doing that. Oh, see you later. Stop doing it like this. This like this IKEA conveyor belt of people going, hey, stop being so toxic. All right, bye.
Right. But if you're not, if there wasn't any documentation on it, there was nothing to show that this was a history of it.
Yeah, that the parallels to this and like in education where we have a student that has special needs, that is violent and maybe and has these issues, and teachers will have these anecdotal notes. We'll take all these notes and we'll have all this stuff, but then they go to the next grade and the administration goes, well, let's see how they do next year. And then it's like everything all those notes that you took, it's like out the window. And then before you know it, they get to high school and this poor kid hasn't had any of this, all of the supports that you've recommended, that you've tried, they go out the window. And it's almost like it's like either they're afraid to address it. They don't want to be the one to be the one to say, hey, this kid needs to be in this, needs to receive these special accommodations or something.
I'm actually on page with you for this because my daughter actually has dyslexia. And I'm always totally shocked from year to year, that her teachers have no clue, and I feel like I have the same conversation every single year. And, like, for example, in her music class last year, she had been getting in trouble for talking and, talking to the little girl beside her. And it was because she doesn't read the music. She plays it by ear. So she'd have the girl beside her play it, and then she'd
go, oh, okay.
And as soon as I talked to the teacher and the teacher realized this, she was like, oh, well, this all makes sense. And I'm like, but this is in her plan. This is in her plan with the school. Why don't you know this?
In the teacher's defense, again, it could be, I don't know the specific situation, but from a teacher's side, a lot of times it's like the teacher, like I would have a kid and all year long I'm doing interventions and even with students with IEPs, I would do the interventions. I would have the data and I'd say, hey, for example, I had a student that came to me that was gifted, but also dyslexic, but nobody addressed the dyslexia. He came up, it's up to third grade, and third grade's that year where they're no longer learning to read. They're starting to read to learn. They've kind of gotten the reading, but he was still struggling with reading, but he was so smart. He was able to outwit tests to still score pretty decently, because he would figure out the test even though he couldn't really read it as well. And so after collecting data and going through a lot of different tests, I bring it to my administration, and his mom and I are sitting there and we're talking. And before his mom came in, one of the staffers leans over to me and is like, well, this kid's on grade level. Why are we meeting about him? And I'm like, because he spells cat A-C-T. Yeah. Because he to me, it blew my mind, because it was like, I don't, it doesn't matter that if he's really gifted and he's able to overcome, he is, how further can he go if he can get the accommodations for his dyslexia? It's like we're judging him by a standard. We should be judging him by his own personal growth. And to me, that's the fundamental thing that needs to change in education. There are a lot of people pushing for this, but what needs to change is you should have a standard, like a target for people to look at, but student growth is so much more important,
Agreed.
and what, because if you compare kids to each other, you're always going to find deficiencies, you're always going to find these problems. But if you compare every student to where they were yesterday, where they were last year, that's what's important. I feel like a kid that goes from not being able to read to actually being able to at least read Jack and Jill, that's a victory, because they've grown. That's progress. But what happens when you have this standard, the kids at the top get bored because they're not being challenged. The kids down below feel like they're dumb because they don't see the growth that they're making. They only see how far from the standard they are. And then the kids here get ignored because they're making the standard, and I think that's what I'm sorry to get on my soapbox about that, but it drives me nuts, because there's it seems it's very similar to where a lot of teachers, we say the same things, but there's so many teachers, it's the prisoner's dilemma. A lot of teachers don't want to be the one to really speak up, because then they're the one that's going to get made an example and fired, or they're going to be the one that suddenly gets they get the largest class for the next 3 years. They get 30 kids instead of 20, and they get a lot of there's backlash when you make waves. Catch new episodes of Mental Health Mondays every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Start your week off with a smile and some inspiration.